I hear you. I don't know when it started. Maybe you've always been there, just quiet enough for me to ignore. But now, your voice is louder, no longer just a whisper in the back of my mind, no longer something I can drown out with work, with obligations, with the noise of everyday life. I see you now in the mirror, in the pauses between distractions, in the silence before sleep. I feel you in my hesitation, in the choices I don't make, in the moments I let slip by. You are the other me, the man I was supposed to be. For years, I convinced myself that you had faded, dissolved into time, lost to the past. I told myself that life had moved on, that I had outgrown you, but you never left. You waited, patient, watching, knowing that one day I would be forced to see you again, and now I do. There was a time when we were the same, when I was you, when life was not a set of obligations, but a question waiting to be answered. You were fearless. You didn't ask for permission. You didn't wait for certainty. You moved, you reached, you acted, you lived. I used to admire that about you. Then I started calling it reckless. I started telling myself that caution was wisdom, that patience was maturity. It wasn't, it was fear. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Jung wasn't just a philosopher. He was a man who spent his life unraveling the unseen forces that shape us, forces we don't acknowledge, don't question, don't even notice. He understood that the choices we avoid, the paths we turn away from, don't simply disappear. They slip beneath the surface of our minds, shaping our lives in ways we never recognize. And then, one day we look back and call it circumstance, we call it responsibility, we call it fate. But it's not fate, is it? It's fear, dressed in respectable clothing. At first it was small, a compromise here, a hesitation there. Just for now, I told myself. Just until things settle, just until I have a better plan. But the years went by, and one day I woke up and realized I wasn't choosing anymore. I was drifting. I built a life, a stable, respectable life. A life people admire. I have responsibilities, accomplishments, proof that I did things the right way, but something is missing. And I think you know what it is. I look at you now, standing just behind me, close enough to whisper, and I wonder, was I ever really choosing? Or did I just convince myself that I was? I told myself that I'd moved forward, that life had taken its course, that I had left behind childish things, but that was never the truth. You were never the past. You were my future. So tell me, is it too late? Or are you still waiting? I used to believe that I had built this life, that every decision, every turn, every sacrifice had been mine, that I had chosen this path, that I had shaped my own destiny. But now, standing here with you staring back at me, I realize the truth. I was never really choosing. How much of this life was actually mine? How many choices did I make because I truly wanted them, and how many did I make because they were expected of me, because they were safe, because they were the kind of choices a man is supposed to make? Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." And I feel that burden now, pressing down on me in ways I never dared to acknowledge. I look at my father, the weight he carried, the sacrifices he made, the silent disappointments he never spoke of, the way he measured his worth not by what he desired, but by what he provided. I never heard him complain, never saw him question his duty. He did what was expected of him, and so I learned to do the same. And my mother, she was different, but in her own way she reinforced the same lesson. She told me to be careful, to be responsible, to be realistic. She wanted me to be safe, not reckless, to be respected, not uncertain. Maybe she never said it outright, but the message was clear. Build a life that looks stable from the outside, and no one will question if you're happy on the inside. So I did. I built a life that looked right, a career, a reputation, a version of myself that was respectable, admirable even, and for years I convinced myself that was enough. But was it? Or was I just following the script they left unfinished? Or worse, was I simply reacting to it? Because that's the truth, isn't it? Some men live their father's life. Some spend their whole existence trying to escape it, but either way they are still bound to it. Soren Kierkegaard once said, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily, not to dare is to lose oneself." Kierkegaard wasn't just a philosopher, he was a man who understood the quiet terror of a life unlived. He saw what most people refuse to admit. Most of us never really live. We exist, we follow routines, meet expectations, do what we're told, but we never truly choose. Because choosing means risking, it means stepping into the unknown. It means standing in the silence of your own mind and deciding, without influence, without permission, who you are going to be. And I wonder, have I ever really done that? Because if I had, then why does my life feel like it belongs to someone else? And you, the man I could have been watching this whole time. Were you waiting for me to notice? Or were you wondering how long it would take before I admitted that I was never really free? I used to think regret was something you looked back on, a distant shadow cast by old mistakes, a weight carried only by the past. But I was wrong. Regret is not about what has been lost, it is about what is slipping away right now. We tell ourselves we have time, that one day the moment will arrive when everything feels right, when the fear quiets, when the uncertainty lifts, when the world gives us permission to act. But time is not something we hold. It is not a possession, not a resource to be stored for later. It is something that moves whether we are ready or not. And every day, with every safe decision, with every road left untaken, you slip further away. I feel it now, the quiet erosion of possibility, the slow, imperceptible way that small choices, the ones I thought didn't matter, have stacked up into a life I never meant to build. I told myself I had years to spare. I told myself I would come back for you. But now I look up and the years are gone. Soren Kierkegaard once said, regret cuts both ways. You regret the risks you didn't take, and you regret the ones you did, but only one path leads to life. Kierkegaard was no stranger to the weight of choice. He believed that most people never truly decide who they are. They just become the sum of expectations placed upon them. He walked away from everything society told him to be, including the woman he loved, because he feared a life lived half-heartedly. His entire philosophy was built on one painful truth. You must either embrace your life fully or one day wake up and realize it was never really yours. And that is what haunts me the most. I thought not choosing was a way to stay safe, that if I hesitated, if I waited just a little longer, the right answer would reveal itself. But now I see it for what it really is, a slow kind of death, because every time I said not yet, every time I said maybe later, I was making a choice. I was choosing absence over presence, silence over action. I was choosing to watch my own life from the outside. And you, the man I could have been waiting. I wonder if you ever believed I would come back for you, or if, in the quiet hours, you realized before I did that I was running out of time. Carl Jung once said, life really begins at 40, until then you are just doing research. Jung understood something that most of us refuse to see until it's almost too late. That the first half of life is spent building careers, reputations, identities we think will protect us. But at some point, the second half begins. And that second half is not about building, it is about reclaiming. But most men never make it to that second half. Most men wait too long. I see them, the ones who did everything right, who played by the rules, who sacrificed their dreams for stability, and now live in a home filled with quiet disappointments. They wake up early, go to jobs they no longer care about, and come home to televisions that hum just loud enough to drown out the silence inside them. I have seen their faces, and I see my future in them. So tell me, how much longer do I really have before you're gone for good? I feel you now, more than ever. For years, I buried you beneath ambition, responsibilities, and distractions. I convinced myself that you were nothing more than a shadow of old dreams, faded, irrelevant, childish. But you never disappeared. You waited, watching, growing heavier with every choice I refused to make. I told myself I was moving forward, but was I? Or was I just drifting, carried by the momentum of a life shaped by fear rather than intention? Carl Jung once said, what you do not bring into consciousness will appear in your life as fate, and that is exactly what you have become, the fate I never meant to choose, but the one I've been living anyway. I see now you are not just the man I could have been. You are the man I still might be if I have the courage to face you. But courage is a strange thing. When we're young, we think of it as action, taking leaps, embracing risk. But I've learned that the hardest courage is not the kind that moves forward. It's the kind that looks backward, because looking back means admitting the truth. And the truth is this: I did not choose this life, not really. I took the path of least resistance. I told myself that life was about compromise, about being practical, about doing what was expected of me. And maybe it was at first, but at what point did practicality become avoidance? At what point did I start calling my fears responsibilities? At what point did I stop choosing and start settling? The weight of it is unbearable now. The excuses, the rationalizations, the years I spent pretending I was exactly where I was meant to be. And you, the other me, you never let me forget. I see you in every man who took the risk I avoided. I hear you in every whisper of regret that comes in the quiet hours. I feel you in every resentment I've ever projected onto someone else. Because it was never them I was angry at, it was always me. Fyodor Dostoevsky once said, lying to ourselves is more deeply ingrained than lying to others. Dostoevsky knew what it meant to live in conflict with oneself. His life was a study of contradiction, imprisoned for his beliefs, condemned to death only to be spared at the last moment, forever wrestling with guilt, redemption, and the fragile nature of choice. He understood that self-deception is the most insidious kind of lie because it convinces us that we are exactly where we're meant to be, even when we are not. And I wonder now, how many years have I spent pretending that I don't want more, pretending that this is enough, pretending that the doors I once saw open before me are not still there, waiting to be walked through. Because the truth is they won't be open forever, and neither will you. This is what no one tells you about time. You think you have it until you don't. You think the roads will always be there waiting until the day you finally decide to walk them, until they aren't. And that day is coming. I see you, standing in front of me, no longer a shadow, no longer just an idea, but something real. And I feel it, the last chance, the final moment before the door closes. I used to think I was afraid of failure, of rejection, of risk. But that was never the real fear, was it? The real fear is this: the fear of waking up one day and realizing that the life I lived was not my own, that I spent my years serving a version of myself I never truly chose, that I played it safe until there was nothing left to risk. And that fear, more than anything, is unbearable. Because it means that if I do not act now, I will become the very thing I swore I never would, one of those men, and so will you. For years I told myself a lie. I told myself that time was on my side, that opportunities were still waiting, that if I truly wanted, I could always turn back. I convinced myself that tomorrow would be different, that one day I would wake up and finally feel ready to take the risks I once feared, ready to become the man I was supposed to be, but tomorrow never came. It became a revolving door of postponed dreams, delayed decisions, and comfortable distractions. Because it's easy to believe that life is long when you're busy surviving it. But the truth is brutal. It does not wait for readiness. It does not give second chances. And it certainly does not pause for the ones who hesitate. Carl Jung once said, "The second half of life is not about success, it is about wholeness." Jung spent his life studying the unconscious, the hidden forces that shape us, the choices we deny. He believed that our unlived lives never disappear. They linger in the background, silently influencing everything we do. He saw that most people never reach true adulthood. They stay trapped in a younger version of themselves, endlessly chasing validation, achievement, security. But the second half of life is different. It is not about building, it is about reclaiming. But most men never get there. Most men wait too long. I have seen them, the ones who played it safe until there was nothing left to risk. The ones who told themselves they could always go back someday, only to wake up one morning and realize that someday had passed. The ones who let time hollow them out until all that remained was routine and regret. And I wonder, am I one of them? Because I am terrified of becoming one. Terrified of reaching the end and realizing that the life I lived was not my own, but a version shaped by fear, by compromise, by all the things I told myself I should do instead of what I needed to do. The most dangerous lie is the one you tell yourself. I have time. But time is not an open road. It is a door, and that door is closing. I feel it now. I feel it in the weight of my regrets. I feel it in the growing fear that I may have missed my chance. I feel it in the slow realization that for the first time, the path ahead looks smaller than the path behind. And you, the other me, you know this. That's why you came back. To remind me that there is still time, to remind me that the door has not yet shut completely, to remind me that it is not too late, but it will be soon. Henry David Thoreau once wrote, "Most men lead lives of quiet desperation." Thoreau understood something most men spend a lifetime avoiding. He saw that the worst kind of suffering is not the dramatic kind. It is the slow, silent erosion of the soul. He left behind a life of expectations and retreated into the woods, not because he wanted isolation, but because he wanted truth. Because he knew that if he did not step away, he would one day become like all the others, numb, disconnected, existing, but never truly living. I used to think I knew what that meant, but now I feel it, because life does not give warnings. It does not whisper when you are about to reach the point of no return. It does not tell you when you are about to become one of those men. It simply lets the moment pass. And if I do not act now, I will become them, and so will you. I used to think you were my enemy, the other me, the man I could have been. The ghost that lingers in every regret, every unfinished dream, every road I never took. For years, I buried you. I silenced you with excuses. I told myself you didn't matter. But I see you now. And I know the truth. You were never my enemy. You were never here to haunt me. You were waiting. Waiting for me to remember you. Waiting for me to turn around. Waiting for me to wake up. Carl Jung said, individuation is about becoming whole. Jung saw that most people go through life fragmented, splitting off parts of themselves, denying their instincts, suppressing their desires. He knew that real growth does not come from avoiding the past, but from integrating it. He called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. The process of reclaiming the parts of yourself you once abandoned. And for the first time, I understand what that means. Because I am not whole. I am not complete. I am a man who has lived half a life while the other half stood in the shadows waiting to be reclaimed. You. The other me, you do not want revenge. You do not want to punish me for my choices. You only want to be seen. And I see you now. I see the fire in your eyes. I see the hunger in your soul. I see the courage I once had. The courage I abandoned in favor of comfort and safety. And I feel something I haven't felt in years. I feel alive, because you were never here to remind me of what I lost. You were here to remind me of what I still have. Carl Rogers once said, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Rogers understood something most people never do. That transformation does not come from rejection, it comes from acceptance. You do not change by hating who you are. You change by finally looking yourself in the eye and saying, I see you, I accept you, now let's begin again, and maybe I can't undo the past. Maybe I can't rewrite the chapters where I chose fear over bravery, hesitation over action. But I can stop running. I can stop pretending that the life I abandoned no longer belongs to me. I can stop believing that I have to spend the rest of my days as half a man, because the road is still open. Miyamoto Musashi once said, it may seem difficult at first, but everything is difficult at first. Musashi lived by discipline. He did not believe in talent, in luck, in fate. He believed in action. He believed that everything, the fear, the hesitation, the unknown, could be conquered through movement. He believed that a man does not become strong by waiting. He becomes strong by stepping forward again and again until the path ahead is clear. And I know the first step will be hard. It will mean facing the truths I've spent years avoiding. It will mean tearing down the walls I built to protect myself. It will mean admitting that I was wrong. But I would rather struggle for a life worth living than remain in a life that is slowly dying. I do not know if I can become you. I do not know if it is too late. But I can stop running. And for the first time, I can walk toward you instead of away from you. I see you, not in a dream, not in a memory, here now, standing in front of me, as real as the air in my lungs. I thought I had buried you. I thought time had erased you. I thought life had moved forward, leaving you behind like an old photograph tucked away in a forgotten drawer. But you were never truly gone. You have been there in the quiet moments, in the pauses between obligations, in the silence before sleep, in the hollow victories that should have felt like triumph but never did. You have been watching, waiting. And now I realize something I have been avoiding for years. You were never the past. You were never some forgotten version of me, left behind in the wreckage of youth. You were always here, always waiting for me to turn around and see you. But how many times did I look away? How many times did I hear you call out to me? How many times did I feel the pull of something more, something right, and ignore it? Not because I didn't want you, but because I was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of losing what I built. Afraid that if I reached for something greater, I would have to admit that what I have is not enough. Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote, "Lying to ourselves is more deeply ingrained than lying to others." Dostoevsky understood the darkest parts of the human mind. He knew how we deceive ourselves, how we construct lives built not on truth, but on what is easiest to believe. He wrote of men trapped in prisons of their own making, shackled not by external forces, but by their own self-deceptions. And that is exactly what I have done. For years, I convinced myself that I had moved on, that I had chosen wisely, that life was meant to unfold this way, but I was lying, not to the world, not to my family, to myself. Because I know the truth. The door has been open all along. I just stopped walking toward it. I told myself I was making choices, but was I, or was I simply avoiding the one that truly mattered? And what about you? How many times have you told yourself not yet? How many times have you ignored the voice inside? How many times have you postponed the life you were meant to live, convincing yourself that there would always be more time? But time does not wait. Time does not care for your hesitation, your excuses, your carefully constructed justifications. Time moves forward, indifferent, relentless, and every moment you delay is a moment lost forever. And yet, here you are, still waiting, but not forever. Time has been merciful to me, but mercy is not the same as eternity. The road is still open, but I can feel it narrowing. The choices I once had without limit are fewer now. I still have a say in who I become, but not for much longer. I know what happens if I turn away again. I've seen it in the faces of men who waited too long. Men who told themselves they could go back someday, only to wake up one morning and realize that someday had passed. I do not want to be one of them. But wanting is not enough. The door is closing. This is the moment, not tomorrow, not later. Now I either step forward or I let you slip away forever. And I know what will happen if I do. You will not haunt me. You will not chase me. You will not scream or demand or linger in the corners of my mind. You will simply disappear. And I will live the rest of my life as half a man, never fully knowing what I could have been. Because when desire dies, you don't even have regret left. You just have emptiness. I've spent years bargaining with time, convincing myself that there would always be more of it, that the man I was meant to be would wait for me, that I could postpone what mattered while tending to what was expected. But time does not bargain, it does not pause, it does not return what is lost. The truth is simple. I can step forward now, or I never will. And that is not a metaphor, it is not a dramatic realization, it is a fact. The longer I hesitate, the harder it becomes. The longer I tell myself that the right moment is just over the horizon, the further it drifts. Until one day it is not there at all. Because the biggest lie we tell ourselves is that life waits for us. It does not. It moves with or without us. And every day that I do not step forward is a day I choose to step away. Soren Kierkegaard once said, "To dare is to lose one's footing momentarily, not to dare is to lose oneself." Kierkegaard understood something most men never will. He knew that fear disguises itself as reason, that hesitation wears the mask of wisdom, that the men who never dare are the men who vanish, slowly, invisibly, into the lives they never truly chose. And I refuse to be one of them. I refuse to live in the shadow of the man I was supposed to be. Because I see it now. I see the cost of waiting. The cost is not failure. The cost is not rejection. The cost is losing the part of me that still dreams. The part of me that still believes it is possible. And what about you? What will you do with the time you have left? Will you let another day slip by, telling yourself that you still have time? Will you keep postponing your own life, convincing yourself that the right moment is just around the corner, or will you do the only thing that has ever mattered? Will you dare? Because this is the moment, right now, not next year, not when it feels easier, not when you are ready, now. Because if I do not claim this life, if I do not step forward, if I do not dare, then the man I was meant to be will slip away forever. And I will wake up one day and realize that the most painful thing is not that I failed. It is that I never even tried. I look at you, the other me, and for the first time I do not hesitate. I do not step away, I step toward you. No more waiting, no more excuses. The time is now and I am ready.